Hi, ladies and gents. Welcome to episode 27 of the Deu Awuok Show, where it is my job to interview professional and collegiate soccer players about their life's journeys around the beautiful game. On this episode, I speak with Elizabeth Eddy, a recently retired veteran soccer player. Amongst other things, we talk about her experience growing up playing soccer, representing the youth national team at the youth level, her college recruiting process, and her decision to commit to USC. And more importantly, we talk about her recent New York Post op-ed calling on the National Women's Soccer League to adopt gender standards. We spent some considerable time talking about a very nuanced and sensitive topic, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Elizabeth, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. How's it going?
It's going great. I'm excited for this conversation, which should be fruitful. You have had a long career playing professional soccer over 10 years across the world, won 7 different titles, and we'll get into all of that. But for those that aren't familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself as Elizabeth Eddy and who you are as a person?
That's a great question. I would say the thing that I think is most important in life is Jesus Christ and knowing him and who he is and who he designed each of us to be. And so I read the Bible every day and I think it's like the best thing ever. And that's, I would say, most important about me. And I just got married 5 months ago. My husband's amazing. And I'm really excited for whatever the next chapter holds. There's a lot of cool things going on. And I'm very thankful for the career of playing pro sports for the last 11 years.
It's amazing. Congrats on the recent wedding.
Thank you.
When did you start playing soccer and who got you involved?
I started playing when I was, I think, 5. My dad was our AYSO soccer coach. We were the Yellow Bumblebees. And he didn't my family does not like soccer, but my family's pretty into sports, more from like a you don't be a fan of someone else's life, be a fan of your own life. So sports are like a great thing to do because it's like healthy outdoors, challenging, and it's like more about character development and like being excellent. So go do it and play and be the very best you can. And like that kind of framework and ecosystem will like help you grow a lot. And that's kind of was the approach growing up. And so my dad coached and it was a very, very, very good coach because he also had like played sports at a really high level. He raced the America's Cup for an American team. And that's kind of like roughly like a little bit bigger in the sport of sailing than the Olympics. And so his whole thing was like, if you say you want to be great, this is the bare minimum expectation, which is like a very, very high bar. And so most people didn't have that way of thinking instilled at a young age.
Mhm.
And the concept of what actually working hard looks like is kinda like the switch is always on 24/7. How can you get better in every way? If it's your sleep or your eating or, like, getting to know your teammates better or, like, communicating with your coach, like, all that was, like, I would say instilled from a pretty young age, and so sports became, like, really fun. I would say, like, a very exciting place to, like, work really hard and then get rewarded for it, and so I, like, loved that concept of, like, you get to grow. It's really challenging, but you're gonna grow a lot from it, and so I started playing when I was 5 because my we lived in LA and it was like the thing to do. And my dad coached us with the kids down the street and we won everything because my dad's a good coach.
That's amazing. At what age did you realize that this could become something I could do professionally and really do well at it?
There wasn't really a professional league growing up for women's soccer. Most people were focused on playing college and getting a scholarship. But when I was in high school, I made the youth national team and I played in the U17 World Cup for the US and we lost to North Korea in the finals, which was a very interesting, I would say, moment of cultural awareness and then massive culture shock of, wow, this is a different way to live. I'm very glad I'm from America. And that was probably where I was like, this would be really cool to do. But even then, I went to college. They gave me a scholarship, which was great. I played. And I think right before I went to college, they started the Women's Pro League, which was fine. My goal was always to play in the Olympics, which I didn't reach that goal.
Mhm.
But that was what drove me was trying to be the best I could at the sport. It wasn't really to play professionally. I was like, if professional is part of it, great. If it's not, whatever.
Got it. So you had an amazing high school career, which you won a couple regional All-American awards, as well as a number of other ones. I imagine you had a number of options to go anywhere. How did you think through that recruiting process? What did it look like for you, and why did you end up going to USC?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I made the youth national team, I think I was 16 or 17. That's like middle of high school. Um, every college in America was like, come, we'll pay for everything, which that was really interesting because the options were like, I had every option in the country. And what's interesting is at that time they would like rank people. And I think I was like the second best high school soccer player in the country. So I could kind of go wherever I wanted to go. Um, one unique detail is that my family has gone to USC, University of Southern California, for like 4 to maybe 5 or 6 generations, depending on which side of the family you look at. I think I was born September 13th. I was probably at a USC football game within 5 days of being born. Like, my family just is very involved at the school and has been
Yeah.
in the past, not so much anymore, but that influence, whereas, like, I only wanna go to USC even if they're not as good at soccer because this is, like, kind of the family culture. And so I actually even visited UCLA. We're, like, on a visit, walking through the campus, going through the bookstore. My dad, like, hangs back after the bookstore, he's like, "Just so you know, I'll never wear powder blue." And I was like, "Thanks, dad, for your opinions." And then, like, my grandma sat me down who's she was quite involved with USC, like, she got her PhD there, she started some programs for athletes there, and so she said, "Hey, just so you know, I won't root for you if you go to any other," at the time, Pac-10 school. I was like, "Thanks for your guys' opinions." So I would say that was, like, I had a lot of strong family influence to go to USC, but that was very much after I already had always wanted that because the family culture was so like, "This is awesome. This is so cool. This is like, look at how much incredible opportunities and experiences we've all been afforded for generations because of this experience." And so I ended up choosing to go to USC, but I almost transferred for the first 2 years, maybe even 3 years, like, every single winter break because soccer season would go so bad. And I would call my dad and I'd be, like, crying and upset about all this stuff. And he'd be like, "Well, okay, let's do a pros and cons list. Where do you wanna end up? Like, what are your goals? Do you wanna, like, end up in Southern California? Like, you might meet the person you're gonna marry in college." Like, all these, like, bigger picture, like, think about life things. And almost every time he kinda, like, talked me off the ledge of, like, "You shouldn't transfer, you should stay, and these are the reasons why," which I think he was objectively right looking back. Although had I transferred, my soccer career probably would have been a bit more successful because you get into a higher caliber environment of training every day at that age when you're kind of getting a lot of opportunity or not. Um, and my college team was not good. After my first year, we made the tournament, lost in the first round, then we didn't make it through the next 3 years, which was terrible. And we were like a good team, but our coach was very, very, very controlling. And the moment he felt out of control, which is usually around game 3 or 4, he would like change the lineup and like freak out. And then he ended up getting fired a week after my last game senior year. So it was just like kind of a sad college soccer experience from like a playing standpoint. But what I'm really glad about, or one other thing was, while I would talk to my dad, I want to transfer in because I want to be the best, I want to win, and I'm not around that for the thing I want to do the most, which is soccer right now. My friends at Stanford and UCLA would like, "Hey, you should transfer. Like, we have the situation set up for you." And I'm like, so like I like would, and I would literally be like, "Don't talk to me. Like, I'm not emotionally stable right now, and I'm gonna get convinced I need to do this." And then I would always kind of get kind of reminded of like there's more to life than your sport. And so then I did stay, but because I stayed, I think my sophomore year I joined the sorority house. Junior year I walked onto the lacrosse team, which had just become Division 1. Senior year I started grad school, so I did a progressive degree, and then I got drafted for the pros, and then I go to the pro team, and then within a day or so being there, like in the way that women's soccer works in the pros, they like sign you and then they own your rights, and then but you don't have, but you have to sign a contract to, like, make the team. So I went out there, they own my rights, and then they're like, "Hey, here's a contract," and then my lacrosse coach said, "Hey, don't sign your pro contract, come back for grad school, we'll pay for your 5th year, and, like, defer it, you can go later." So I did that, but all of that other, like, life development and, like, holistic well-roundedness would not have happened had I transferred colleges to play at a better soccer school, and I'm so glad I stayed at USC because I think you kind of become what you're around, and a lot of things about USC from a culture standpoint, I really, really like. Specifically that it's, like, very competitive, international, and in, like, the best like, Southern California, like, the best place in the world, if you're in, like, America, because you just have, like, the weather is fantastic, you can be in the ocean all the time, like, so many things about it is, like, the place that I wanna be the rest of my life, which now I've got married and we moved down here to Newport, and I'm like, "This is great, it's all worked out fantastic."
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think you touch on some very important stuff there, especially when it comes to just the holistic process, right? There's like the soccer team and the program and the culture. There's the university where it's situated. There's like, programming for what you want to do, maybe if you don't want to go professional with soccer. So the other things that people should be considering for young, boys and girls in high school, middle school that want to go play Division 1 soccer. I know for you, process over a decade ago, and things have changed a lot. But what advice do you have for those thinking about playing at the highest level, at the collegiate level?
I would say the best advice I have when you're trying to figure out what college and even pro is it's totally fine to be like, "Soccer is the goal, I'm gonna do everything for that." I was really encouraged by my family to, like, recognize there's more than soccer, which I think was right for me, and I think is best, like, big picture long term. But if soccer is kinda like your way to, like, move stations in life and that's important to you, I would say definitely focus a little bit differently than I was encouraged by my family in college. And I would say the thing to actually look for isn't am I on the best team? It's is the coach do I trust that they're gonna, like, invest in me as a player and I'll grow and get the chance to play because your play and your, like, craft that you've become excellent in is what's gonna open doors for you, and you're putting all of that effort you put in your whole life to this coach's hands. So, like, just know that that's kind of the lines of the sandbox you're playing, and then you have to think even bigger than the coach. Cool, coach likes me. Does the coach have a track record that they're gonna keep the job? So if I commit here, are they gonna be there? I don't know. Again, you're making a lot of educated bets and like risks, but that's life. So don't worry about it, but be aware of what's going on. And then, so is the coach like really value me? And then are they gonna have job security? Like, is the owner, if it's a pro team, gonna like, hey, we like the coach, like listen to press conferences. What are the coaches saying? What are the GMs saying? Like, how is the vibe going? What's their record? Are they winning? Usually when coaches win, the ownership wants to keep them. Then if it's college, I'd say same thing. It's a little more job security in college. So that's like two things to look at. Then the third thing to look at is like who's would be on the team that you're joining and where do you fit? And what positions are there gaps in, and are you skilled in those positions? Like, you need to think a lot more strategically and intentionally of like, is there a chance for me to be like a significant contributor on this team or not? And if you're not going to be a significant contributor, I would say pick another team or do something else. Cause I think that at the end of the day, the number one goal as an athlete is to continue like developing and grow. And you can only grow if you're playing enough in the games and then you're like getting the reps at like live. The only time it's worth going on a team that you're kinda not good enough to be on, like you're gonna be like a practice player or bench player, is if that's the best coach in your whole division and the team is the best, so you're gonna eventually at training get better up to that level. That's the only time to go, but you have to be self-aware enough to be like, "I'm not at this level, but I can make it. I'm good enough and they see value in me to grow." Do it, but still do it with like a 6-month, 12-month, and 18-month, like, scheduled check and reevaluation with the coach, and then, "Hey, I'm gonna go somewhere else if we're not seeing eye to eye, and I haven't grown to where you want me to grow, or there's an opportunity because you have to get minutes in games, and it's not like throw a tantrum when you don't get minutes in games. It's the only reason why minutes in games is valuable is because minutes in games lets you test your development. Did my development that I've been developing, does it hold the test under pressure? Like game is the pressure. So like it's more about like how do I think about cool, my job, what I want to do most of my life is like play my sport. Awesome. You're really clear on that. Then the number one goal to make it your career is to like recognize that the whole thing is about developing every day and don't get sucked into the money or the city or the cultural experience or like what I was encouraged to do, which is like life experience. That's great. That's not wrong. That's what I chose and that it worked out for me in a lot of ways. But if I'm advising somebody of like, hey, I want to be the best athlete I can, I want to be the best in the sport, that's the way I think about it.
Yeah, I think I agree there because I think it's easier. You know, you might have options to go to a top school, and the name might be enticing, right? You can go to play at Stanford or whatever, but if you're not gonna play, you're not gonna develop as a player, right? So what good is it just being part of that program? If your end goal is to get better, right? You won't be playing in practice, but also in games because the games is like where the real pressure is. So I think being thoughtful about that is, I think, it's gonna go a long way in terms of the players and their development.
Well, and I would say what it really reveals about the person making the decision is two things. If you choose, I'm kind of done with soccer. I'm just happy to be in this team and attach myself to this brand. That's totally fine. But now it's not about your development. It's like a life experience. Cool. It's not really betting on yourself from an athletic standpoint. It might be betting on yourself from a, I'm going to use this to like leapfrog into other aspects of life. Totally great. I would say it's more important to own that because then you'll be able to like operate more healthily if you're like, "Hey, I genuinely believe I can make it," then I think attaching yourself to the Stanford name or whatever, like signing pro contract early, that's like has a high probability of like undermining the goal because if you really believe in yourself, it's like, "No, I'm gonna go I need to get playing and I need to get in this environment and I'm gonna like bet on myself that I will make it there." And I don't really care the route. Like I can choose a less flashy route because I like actually believe I'm gonna make it. So I think it also comes down to how much you believe in yourself at one aspect.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And we're going to shift gears a little bit to the professional, right? You mentioned growing up, there was no professional league here in the US, and you obviously were part of the National Women's Soccer League here, which has grown tremendously over the years. I guess maybe your thoughts on that growth, right? And your experience growing with the league. You spent over 10 years playing professional soccer, and you've seen it from the start and now to where it is today. Just maybe your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I would say that it's been a really cool experience to back to the bet on yourself concept, because once I went to the pros, it was like, I want to do this and I want to bet on myself. And it was like, cool, join this league that's the best that America has. You're not making much money, but you're doing it because you love it. And you have almost half the year off. So you like work at whatever you can to make it make sense, keep training. And then you get the chance the next year in the league if you keep playing well and they value you as a player. But to see what it was, I think before I joined at the very beginning, it was like $6,000 a year they'd make and they'd play for 6 months. And now it's like a 10-month season and some contracts are like 2-3 million dollars. So you're like the exponential growth of the league is like incredible. And so I think of it more, wow, I helped join a startup that was totally very much beginning stages and like at many points almost failed. And we've now like kind of turned the corner and we've like, I would say just crossed the critical like tipping point of like it's going to work. But I would still say with that, I think having been in it for a long time, there's certain fundamental, actually, I don't even say like from a soccer standpoint, it's they're approaching things really well and they're trying to do things businessly sound in like infrastructure. But I would say the biggest issue in the league right now is how much they're playing like the politics game and getting involved with things that are more about like the culture of the city and like the people in the city that have bought the team that want to like make sure their belief systems are on display instead of focusing on like being excellent at the craft. There's like a big battle for that right now from like where you choose to spend time and energy. But I would say bigger picture, there's enough good people in it that understand the sport to like keep pushing it. So I think it'll do great.
Got it. And I guess on that point, you recently wrote an op-ed in the New York title, National Women's Soccer League must adopt gender standards to keep growing. Talk to
Mhm.
us about your thought process behind writing that article and then some of the backlashes you received from it.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to writing the article, what it started happening in the league is there's like in 2021 was the last time there was a like policy about like basically defining who the league's for and like how to like manage that. And so for context in most professional sports, like in any competitive environment, there's like no doping. We're gonna test for testosterone. Like Lance Armstrong was like just stripped of all his medals because he was taking testosterone while he performed. So that's like a performance enhancing aspect of it. And so our league did away with all policies at all of like defining things or testing for things in
Hmm.
2021. And then what I noticed is our league had people joining the league that were really, really successful. And then in a way that's like, I would say we don't test so no one knows, but I would say to ensure that it's a women's league that's for women only from a chromosomal standpoint, I think testing everybody's the right choice. Because I think at the end of the day, if you don't actually define what a woman is and then have a policy that protects that, you then kind of get into this like case by case, anything goes. And what's really unfortunate is women are like weaker than people that are intersex, women are weaker than trans women, women are weaker than men. So women are the ones that lose out in this whole conversation. But at the same time, like the intersex and the trans people are also struggling. But I don't think to like help them is to take for women. I think it's like there's enough to go around, protect women's category, and then build a third category for this like new aspects of life that we're becoming aware of as like I would say more people are speaking up in general, which is an amazing thing that people have the freedom to speak up and try to figure out how can I get involved in what I want to get involved in. But I think at the same time, you still have to like have guardrails that are like honoring like biological and chromosomal truth. And so to me, it was like it's a pretty big topic that unfortunately gets very political. And I don't really see it as political. I see it more as factual and like respecting reality. But at the end of the day, we're in the mess of whatever America's going through. And then I think what was really, really tough is like how I knew that it wouldn't be like very popular in the women's soccer world to say that to ask for a definition to a woman and then ask for a policy and then also suggest we work together to find a third solution. I understood that wouldn't be popular. I didn't realize how unpopular it would be and then how much like group think operates. And like, so some people really do believe that gender is like not a reality, like that doesn't matter. And so
Yeah.
that's totally great. People have different beliefs and opinions, and that's why we have free will and freedom of thought or freedom in America at this moment. And we're working through that. But what's tricky is then like the people that believe that, then everybody else is like scared of going against that. And then to like see how once it like the stuff went public, then it got like a lot of people got involved in a way that was like really sad because it became about things that I was not at all trying to talk about. And that's kind of what happens with politics. And so it was like really hard to go through, but I still am like reasonably people can disagree, but we can't resort to name calling and bullying. And like we have to sit at the same table to work through this. This topic's not going away. We can't
Yeah.
just like shame other people out of the conversation. That's not the way to move forward. And so trying to still figure out how to help move the conversation forward while being like, yeah, I'm so happy I spent 11 years helping build this league. I also think this league needs to have some guardrails. And if this league chooses not to, great. Another league will come up that's for women only. But let's just actually call a spade a spade. And so trying to work through all that's definitely really difficult. And it's definitely professionally and personally been like difficult, like relationally. But at the end of the day, standing up for what I believe is right and what I believe is really important to live like in reality and what is true and how do we live underneath the reality of that is more important than like maintaining relationships. And I think at the end of the day, this will shake out and women's categories will be protected. So it's, I feel like really painful in the short term, but long term is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and it's a, as I'm sure you're well aware, it's a very, complicated issue. And when I first read the headline, right, and then the reaction to it, I was confused. I'm like, this seems like a no-brainer. Like, there should be rules in place to like ensure that there's obviously integrity and fairness. But then obviously as I did more work on the topic, that's when it became a bit more clear to me that's a bit more complicated and there's a lot more nuance that I didn't really appreciate. I guess on that point about some of the feedback that you got back was negative. I think your teammates had, I think they're critical about some of the undertones, right, that came off as maybe racist or transphobic. I guess as we reflect on the article and maybe their feedback, is there anything that you maybe wish you didn't say or would have done differently? Or I guess how do you I guess take on what they've said about the article itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly would change nothing about the words I wrote. Every single word I stand by. I think it's important to have conversations. And I think the way I wrote it, I think people can read into that if they want, and people can kind of decide whatever they want. But every single word I wrote, I stand by. And I think at the end of the day, like I said, women need to be protected. Let's build third categories. We can do this together. This is part of like how the world moves and evolves. But what was really a shame, and I didn't realize how politics in America, I knew it was like kind of dirty business. I didn't realize how much they could hijack a conversation like this. And the way they chose to like single out a player in our league and use a picture of them in the article is I think where my teammates are like, "Oh, Elizabeth picked this picture." And what's sad is I was like, "Oh, it looks like I picked the picture." And then as I learned more, a lot of friends, not I didn't know this as much, but are like, "That's not how the news works. The news has the freedom to pick the picture. The person writing the article doesn't get to choose that." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's crazy because I've tried to read a bit and I didn't even know that. And I know most of my athlete teammates don't even know that at all. So the fact that they're like, you did this, you singled somebody out. I'm like, I actually didn't at all. Unfortunately, this is kind of how narratives are driven and how people, I would say, like get their points across politically, which is like, that was like a really big bummer. And I explained that to my teammates and I was like, I can't change that, that this is like what has been done. I stand by every word I wrote. I still think this conversation needs to be had. And I still think we can all work together to this, but I can be the one I can want to go sit at the table, but other people have to also be willing to. And that's the other tricky piece is we're at a moment in culture right now that people have been so conditioned, like the way they think is the moment I feel like uncomfortable or not respected how I think I should be, like I need a boundary and I won't speak to you and I'm going to like kind of like fully cut this person out. But unfortunately, instead of actually trying to understand the differences, it's like immediate violent or like violence, not the right word, volatile like response. And so then it's like really hard to work together to have a conversation in any topic. And so that's kind of the landscape that this is happening in. But I do think that because for so long myself and many other people didn't speak on many topics that like people that I and other people had opinions on that like, oh, I think this is true and better than this option. But it was like
Mhm.
my job as a pro athlete is to like play the game, do anything you can to be a good teammate, like go along to get along. Your job is not to go talk about politics. And by choosing to not engage at an earlier state in my career, then it allows the league to continue going in a certain direction. It's like, wait, I should have talked about this stuff like years ago, but I was so focused on being literally being selfish and I want to play. So that's another kind of big individual growth edge of like, wait, you know what you believe. You've never been confused about that. You just chose to like hold it in your hand and not look at it. Because if you look at what you know is true, it'll really like shape your character and like help you grow strong in it. And then you need to very much speak truth with like gentleness, because the goal is not go like single people out and target them. But then unfortunately, with the way the article was like placed, like how images are chosen, I totally understand how people went the direction they went. But I'm like, hey, forget the image, read what the words are, and like there's actually something serious here, and that actually matters a lot. So it's
Yeah.
really hard because we're in like a very like fragile reactionary culture, and it's like, well, the only way to work through that is to like be willing to deal with the reactionary aspect and like slowly keep working forward.
No, that makes sense, and I think that was the conclusion I got to. I was like, the headline reads one thing. I'm like, oh, this seems like a simple point of view that would be worth discussing. But then you read into it more, and then you see the picture and some of the articles that were linked, and you're like, okay, well, the undertones obviously and the impact that came after that, right? Because I think there's other articles that came after that, and Minute came after that, and then Fox ran their own segment in which I think one of the commentators came on and said, "Oh, there's males in the women's league," and called some people out by name, which again they're not led up to more abuse that some of these players were receiving. So it was like
Totally.
I can't obviously can't criticize you for the actions of other people, but there was like a downstream of the article
Yeah.
itself.
Well, and then what's sad is I'm like, prior to me writing an article, the way for the league to lack responsibility to own what it is and actually have a policy opens the door for the criticism since 2021. So it's like this is already happening. I definitely was like, now let's actually talk about it and move it forward. And what's interesting is in like conversations with like the PA and the leaders of that, they're like, why didn't you feel safe talking in private channels? I'm like, I've tried to talk about this for a year to people on the team and then people in the player association. It gets minimized and shut down. Like, at what point? Like, and it's like, hey, what? They're like, what literature are you reading? Like, let's add it to literature bank. I'm like, this isn't a literature of like conversation. This is like simple science, and then we can work together to build third. Like, there's like, I feel like what's happening is you try to talk, and then it's like, oh, you just don't know. Let's re-educate you. And I'm like, that's not how this works. So it's like really complicated and really deep. And at the end of the day, what I'm learning is like when you know something's true that like is not going to change, you have to stand on that and then slowly work through the parts that are like gray area that we don't fully know yet and work together. But you can't like bend on the like break the truth to like make people happy because that actually hurts everyone long term. And I don't know the right solutions fully, but I'm like, we have to start with what's actually objectively true.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this earlier. Right? The league had a policy that obviously expired, and it just didn't come up with a new policy. And I think some of the complications around, you know, verifying and some of the procedures you would then use to evaluate and figure out who's eligible and stuff. It's a bit, the biology is not as simple, right? I think in high school or middle school, you're taught, hey, X chromosome and XY, that's that. But it's a bit more complicated than that. And I think maybe the fact that the science is very clear. The fact that maybe FIFA doesn't even have their own policy when it comes to trans athlete, it like limits the ability of the league, because then in one case you could have certain policies, but then if they don't align with the FIFA, then you can have players be excluded from playing in the women's league, but then be able to play at the international tournament, which is a bit
Totally.
backwards, right? So I don't know. I don't know what the league is thinking and how they're approaching this, but I was thinking maybe that could be the rationale why they haven't
Totally.
done anything about it yet.
Well, and what's interesting is the Olympics just like announced we will use SRY gene test, and although it's not perfect, it's the best ability to draw a line in the sand to protect women's category. And it's and what's to me interesting is it's like I see how some people could call it exclusionary, but I actually think it's inclusive of women, and then people that don't fit the SRY gene test category can go compete in the male category, or like technically it's probably an open category. So to me, it's just like people can compete. And I'm even like, how about we build a fund for people that either are like have the Y chromosome but not fully like matured, or are originally men that have transitioned to women, and be like, hey, here's a fund to help you like basically become an athlete that's at the level that your genetics could be at so that you can compete with the men. Like I think there's a way to actually help, like, hey, case by case, how do we help people that want to play sports that are like more advantaged chromosomally than women? I'm like, this is totally doable, but I do think there's like a lot of like emotional pieces, identity wrapped up to it. But even at the end of the day, until we can talk about the reality of things, it's like we have to like agree that there is truth. And right now, people are like in the name of ambiguity saying there's no truth and we just don't know yet. And I'm like, that's just like a stalling tactic. That's not actually dealing with reality.
Yeah, on that point about SRY testing, I guess some of the organizations that you already employ right now have exceptions for certain, difference of sexual development, right? Including what is it called? Complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. I guess in your mind, would those cases be exempt, and others that are maybe partial and other DSD?
Yeah, that's where to me, I'm like, I don't know the right answer, but I know that this needs to move forward and happen so that women's categories are protected. And I would say that what England did, which was a lot of people did not like it, but they said people born with ovaries was the way they defined it. And then the way the Olympics has now defined it is SRY gene test. And I'm like, and I think I referenced both those in the article. I'm like, I don't really know what's best. And that's not, we're not even almost there at that conversation yet. The conversation is, do we, should we have a policy, and will we protect the people that don't have the chromosomal advantage? And what the league's currently saying is, no, it doesn't matter that women are chromosomally weaker, and everybody's that's like, yeah, they're basically saying, no, we don't care we don't won't define women, and we don't want a policy for it. That's like the league's current stance. So at the end of the day, it's like, what's interesting is a lot of people in America don't really even know, because not that some people watch women's soccer, but not that many do it. And if more people are aware, I don't think that's good for, at the end of the day, sports is a business and it's an entertainment business. I don't think people like that, like as a collective public, of like, people don't want to watch things that are not like, it would almost feel like false advertising, like here's for the women, and then it's like, or unless there's like more opportunity for other people, but like it's case by case, and so we kind of like get to move the lines when we want, and people in America don't really love that concept. And so I think it'll be interesting as time goes, depending on how the league chooses to act about decisions on this space, because I think the topic is definitely complicated and nuanced, but there is a very core, very simple and not complicated aspect of it.
Yeah,
It's like, admit that this is real, and then we need to work together through the messy thing that you just brought up. Like, there is a lot, like, is it DSD or androgen sensitivity or SRYG, like, or is it ovaries? Like, I don't really know, but that's something to be like taken time to consider and actually work through, but choose to work through it, versus we're currently, it's like, we're not working through it. That's not real. That's not happening. We don't want to deal with it. And I'm like, that's not like in good faith. That's not honest. That's not how you collaborate. That's not living in chromosomal reality. So I think it's like, first we have to admit there's reality, and then we can work to figure out how to do that. But at this point, it's like, this is real. No, it's not. And it's that. But sadly, we're there.
yeah, this is a lot more complex than I initially understood it to be. And yeah, I mean, to your point about the FA rule, right? I think ultimately comes down to like a documentation thing. It's like, what were you assigned at birth, right? And then,
Yeah.
but then if you want to combine that with SRY, then there's people that are going to be born without ovaries, people that have that special, CAIS case, but are technically born female, raised a woman, right? And they grew up women. That's what the legal documents say. So they would pass the FA rule, but then the SRY gene, which, Andrew Sinclair, who discovered himself, claims is not a very reliable. So this, again, I
Yeah.
don't
It's
know.
messy. It's totally
Yeah,
messy. It is not, figuring out what line to draw in the sand is not super clear, and that will take time to work through. But to admit that their women are weaker than people that have genetic chromosomal differences is like, I think the first starting point, because right now how I was treated is like, how dare you even ask a question? That's not, you're not allowed to question the reality we've created here. And that, I think, is a disservice to the whole thing.
yeah. So I guess you think it's more them. Obviously I don't know what the league is thinking through, but you think it's more them not wanting to have this discussion, or just say and say that this is a very complex case and there's a lot of moving pieces and there's other governing bodies that are above us that we don't even know where they stand. So that let us figure out what the science, the science is very clear on this. Let us wait, see what others are doing, and they're trying to balance obviously the fairness and integrity of the sport, but also the inclusivity, right? Because it's like
Totally.
we're seeing players now in the league who are getting harassed, who are cis women, who, but because they maybe look different or whatnot.
Which is not okay.
Yeah,
But it's like, but we also like, until it's like clear of like, hey, this is how we as a league will be leaders and communicate why we're doing what we're doing in a way that's like, I would, because I think what's happening is people are like, I don't believe that you're sincere in saying you're trying to lead well in this environment. They're saying we're going to protect people, and they're like, well, then how? And it's like, well, then telling everybody that they're wrong for making a question. It's like, you need to like call a spade, and like, almost to protect the players that are getting harassed, be like, here's our standard, here's what we do, and here's why. Versus, we don't want to have a policy and we're not going to deal with it for now 5 years. Like, that's, at some point, it's like, you can say what you want, and then I'm like, I'm going to watch your actions and how long it takes you to make a decision. And you can say you're waiting, and I'm like, it's with the Olympic announcing it, I'm like, it's not. This is now the highest governing body. FIFA I guess FIFA for soccer is higher, but it depends on your perspective on it. But it's like eventually, I hope they make a choice at some point, but they also don't have to. It's a private enterprise. Pro sports. It's a entertainment game.
Yeah, I think just maybe taking a step back, and I think most people would agree that uh, somebody who was born a male who went through puberty and has advantages of the testosterone shouldn't be allowed to compete. But then I think the problem or the tricky part is like, okay, well, people that are born with these special cases, or maybe people who maybe were born male but transitioned before puberty and they didn't take advantage of the advantage that come with being having testosterone. I think it becomes a question of, are we concerned about the fairness of the sport, and that has to deal with the physiological advantages that come with being a male? Or are we concerned about, and then also balancing that with people who maybe don't fit, that maybe were born with ovaries or other SRG testing, but don't have those physical advantages? Like, should they then be included, right? And then trying to like think through, well, it's not. I guess some people could make the argument it's not really an issue now because there's no male players in this space, and it could be an issue in the down the line. And do we take the stance of like, hey, it's better to have one criminal go free than to like imprison or hurt five other innocent people? Like, that framing, I think, is maybe where the league is at, and obviously I don't know what they think about. How do you what's your perspective on people saying, "Hey, this is not a non-issue right now. We're being preemptive about something that could be, in the future, and if it becomes an issue in the future, let's tackle it then, as opposed to like doing something early that maybe isn't as inclusive right now."
I think that based on like science, despite if somebody went through puberty or not and has more testosterone, if a born a male, you have like from a science standpoint more bone density potential, more bone density, bigger lung capacity, like more muscle tissue mass, even if you take blockers. So it still doesn't make it like fair. So I think that actually like to like from a league standardization standpoint, one person that's out of like, oh, I have an unfair advantage is like one too many, because that's one. If it's the like if this person truly has an advantage and a woman tries to compete and just can't physiologically based on the science, then that's one person's spot lost. So then it's like the whole concept of like women's rights in the 60s and then women's having Title IX sports. And I'm like, then we kind of jeopardize the whole system if we don't start with defining it. But to your point, it is totally sticky. And there is people can say it's not a big deal, but I actually would push back. And that's, I was like, it actually is a big deal. One person is one girl spot gone, if that's what it is. But until we look at the science and decide what line in the sand we're going to draw, then we can own it and walk a line. But right now it's like to absolve responsibility of like, hey, we're going to actually have a decision here. And then to say that and then take 4 years is like, to me, like not taking it very seriously.
Yeah, yeah. And as we discussed, I just realized we're running, right quite behind schedule here, so we're gonna pivot, pivot a little bit. But yeah, to your point, it's a very nuanced discussion, and I think there should be a discussion. And I think maybe the league behind closed door, figure out what's the best as we balance, fairness, integrity of the game, but also making sure that we're not being exclusionary, um, and how do we manage the messy dynamic of going and verifying certain things, and how do you manage people who are maybe, again, there's a lot of nuance to it, and I think maybe the league is working towards that, and we'll see.
The one thing I'd want to just end on this kind of topic is I don't think exclusionary is a bad thing. I think we all have different categories in life for reasons, and it's not a bad thing. And so it's like just clearly define whatever group you're in, and then that group's for that people, and this group's for that people, and this group's like that's just how all of life works. And I don't think it's a bad thing. It's like not everything's for everyone. And I think there's this other thought of like everyone should do everything. It's like I'm not suited to go be a 6'5" rower on the male Olympic team. Like that's just not going to be in the cards for me. I don't want to do that, but it's like I'm excluded from that because I'm a woman. I'm like, yeah, great. I don't really care. But it's like, I think it's that ability to be like blind inclusion. It's like inclusion to what based on what, or like belonging and like, what do you belong to? Okay. When you say someone belongs at the same time, by default, somebody's not belonging. Like that's how, like, even like when people say freedom, like freedom to do what or freedom from what, like everything has to be attached to something that they stand on as truth, and that's fine, but like define that. So when it's like let's be inclusive, it's like we're inclusive to this, we're not inclusive to a question or a different ideology. So it's like there's already exclusion happening within this concept of inclusion. So I just think it's like mincing words a bit.
Yeah, and and it comes back to that idea of it's just complicated. I don't think we can clearly define, because if we use the overuse example, or if we use it, SRY testing, gene testing, there's like obviously nuances and there's exceptions all the time, and people in programs that deploy those policies then exempt certain cases. So then, by the technical term of the definition of a woman, then maybe they won't qualify, but based off like the fairness principle and like how they develop as female, born female, then they would qualify. So that's a bit. I get that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and then it's like, aside from this conversation, our league doesn't even test for testosterone. So if you're not going to test just for performance enhancing drugs regularly, like you're like sliding scale of like what is you're calling it competition, and it's like it's unregulated competition. So then it's like it almost is getting to what's that one like somebody starting an Olympics where it's like encouraging like drug use to optimize performance. I can't remember enhanced games. I think have you seen it?
The new enhanced game, yeah.
But it's like, that's the whole thing, like, be that or don't, but, like, they're being honest with what they're doing, and then in my league's case, I'm like, "This isn't an honest approach." But I understand it's hard, but, like, you chose to lead something and you've done a good job making it really successful. I still think there's, like, a lot more leadership to be had and responsibility to be taken from the league. It's like the league has to decide, like, it's like private business. You gotta, like, claim your values, have your mission statement, and walk your line, and then own it, and then take the heat, and then answer, and then, like, just can keep going and build your thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with about having a policy, and I was quite surprised at the beginning of this research to find that they didn't have a policy, or at least if the policy they had expired and they didn't come up with a new one. But I think given the complication of the different moving parts, I can understand maybe they're working in the background to figure out what works for the league, and maybe they'll come out with something after FIFA's come out, and maybe they will follow that path. But yeah, as we've discussed, it's a very very complex and nuanced discussion. I will pivot a little bit as you reflect on your illustrious college career, having won many titles, having played across the world. What would you say has been the toughest part of being a professional soccer player? Or what's your toughest experience and how did you get over that?
I would say the toughest part is just the sheer, like, volume or, like, the approach to be excellent, which is what I try to take to do pro sports, is, like, if you're gonna be honest about it, is, like, all aspects of life. Like, did you get the sleep? Did you do the right supplements? Did you, like, is your circadian rhythm dialed? Like, are you able to get yourself by game day, I'm gonna be like, "I'm just happy to be here and play lucid free like I'm 5 years old again." And, like, despite all the other pressures moving and, like, the money involved, and then, like, I don't know, girls' sports, I think, are different than boys' sports and how girls treat each other. It becomes, like, kinda high school catty group think and, like, "I don't like you, I wanna pass you the ball," and you're like, "How come on, guys." So that actually, I think, even plays into that prior conversation of, like, girls get so, like, territorial towards each other or their two friends, and they, like, don't like this friend, and you're like, "What is going on?" But that is a really complicated, hard spot part of women's sports that I'm like, "Well, you chose team sports, Elizabeth. You're gonna have to learn to work through this," and that's healthy to learn. Like, you gotta learn how this kind of group dynamic stuff works, and, like, I would call it social dynamics, and I'd say that was actually the hardest piece because then it turns into, like, "Oh, well, this player is more, like, emotionally stable. They can be not started and they won't ruin the team culture." Like, you're getting into that with a girls' sports team, and I'm like, man, I was raised to, like, be the best you can and, like, you're gonna get the merit you deserve kinda thing, and in women's sports, men's is probably different. There's a whole lot of other layers to the scheme, and I would almost encourage every, like, girl athlete to be like, "Yes, be the best you can," like the boys are expected. You also have to learn as a girl on a girls' sports team, the layers are quite different, and there's, like, really quick, like, group think happens, and then this person's out, but then it changes in 2 days because the girls are just like have a different emotional and hormonal cycle, and it's like that. It's like a real part of it. To me, that was like I would say the most I don't know, like challenging part because you're trying to create buy-in to like stick with the coach's game plan when you're losing. I mean, there's the layers of that is like I'd be, oh, I'm done at like 2 p.m. Nope, I'm on the phone for an hour or two or going to a friend's house for dinner to try to like help them debrief and the coach yelled at them. Like you've been in sports awareness, you get it. Boys, it's a little different because they like punch each other in the face and then it's over and they're like, so you had beers. And then girls are like, I thought about it for the last 7 hours. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that's like, I think a big part of like women are wired this way, men are not, or wired this way. So like know what you're wired like and then play that game. Like that's part of this women's sports piece. The men's sports is a little different, but you still both have to be excellent. And then it's like managing the social side. That was hardest for sure.
That's an interesting point, and it makes complete sense. And I just think it makes it even harder because I think for us, And at least for me personally, like when I'm playing, I'm a very nice guy, all right. Like, but when I was captain in my high school and stuff, like there's times I'll be demanding. I'll say stuff that are maybe not nice. I don't think about them, and by the time we leave the field, it's a completely different thing. Like our friendship is not impacted based off what I said on the field. And I've had when I was in college, I had seniors like yelling at me and cursing me, right? Like it's just part of. I just couldn't imagine if they were thoughtful about, or they try to be thoughtful about how they worded things, or they maybe held back because they felt they would. I just think it makes it a bit more complicated. But again, I think we have to just deal with it as a woman playing games.
Totally, and that's where I'm like, no, like, girls almost need to, like, also learn how can I communicate or even, realistically, what ideal is the captain says, "Hey, we're gonna level set. Here's how we operate as a team. We're gonna speak the truth. It might be harsh and your feelings might be hurt, but we're gonna back that truth up I might have said. We're gonna go if I called you out in training, I'm gonna pull the clip and basically help you see the closed loop and why I said that." And why this is a good for the team. Because if you don't close the loop and say, I said the words, your feelings are hurt, here's the visual, here's why that visual shows that when you do this in the game, we lose. Like if that loop can be closed, girls are like actually want to be part of the feedback situation. But right now the loop's not closing on every team I've been on for 11 years. And I'm like, well, this is tough because it's just gets, yeah, very catty.
Yeah. As you reflect on your career, knowing that you know now, like is there anything you would change differently?
That's a great question. I think the thing if I since my goal was to play in the Olympics, the thing I might have changed was if I would say no. I loved my career and I loved my life so far, but if I was, like, solely like, because I think my approach is more like I wanna, like, live a full, whole life, but if my goal was only going to the Olympics, then I probably should have transferred in college and gone to Stanford or UCLA and been in that environment, and then I might have gotten my Olympics goals, but I also wouldn't have been well-rounded in other ways, so I, like, wouldn't change anything, and I probably wouldn't have met my husband, so it's just like, I wouldn't change it, but I, like if I'm gonna be ruthlessly focused on being optimizing as an athlete, I needed to go where there's better training and better players and a better team.
Got it. What is one piece of advice you would give to young soccer players that want to play the highest level, right? Playing professionally, playing for the national team, etc. Like, what advice would you give them?
I would say the most important thing as an athlete that wants to play the highest level they can is to watch the best players in the world and then see which ones have a similar genetics as they do and then model their game after them and then systematically stack like cool like I'm doing this in my games, this is what they're doing in their games, how can I like bridge the gap of my like skill development based on game moments, and I would tie everything back to like game film of the best and game film of yourself. And this is across all sports. And it's like let yourself be a sponge and like Play-Doh or like clay and be molded into what you can become. And the fastest way there is if you own your development, you're not trusting your parents or your friends or your team or your captain. That's all like your parent family will probably stay in the picture. But everything else is pretty revolving. And unless you start to own your development more, you won't reach becoming excellent in your craft. And I would say focus on it as like a craft, even like it's more art than it is like warrior, because warriors like you check your brain out and you just kind of go mode. I mean, at least there's like that's kind of a shallow way to think about it. But on the art side, it's like you have to like get into the details, the nuance, give yourself the space to like process. Like, how do I like what's happening? How do I feel? How can I recognize what my teammates are feeling? If you start getting into that piece, you'll develop really quickly because you start realizing what matters. And I think the biggest thing for athletes is this phrase. It's like when to do what. Great, you worked hard at passing the ball and shooting and dribbling. You got the what down. But if you don't know when to do it, it does not matter. And I think the way to learn the when piece is to like the whole approach is like a totally different model than I started doing the last couple of years of my career and it like was fantastic. But you watch game, you pull out moments you want to emulate and you like try to emulate them like exactly. So you go to the field with a bag of balls with one teammate, show them the clip, say, hey, I want the pass at this pace, at this angle. I need to be sprinting or standing. And this is how we enter the moment. And then we like perform the action. So then when I like, oh, I got 10 reps decent. Now I'm in the game. I'm now actually capable of that moment at that rate with that intensity. So to me, it's like you can recreate game moments all the time if you like specifically watch the clip and then mimic the details, because then you get so lost in that process, your brain and body builds the sequencing, and then it's second nature really quickly. Where most of our time is spent talking to our coaches, talking about team tactics, doing wall ball, and I'm like, this is wasteful.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess wrapping up here with the World Cup coming up, how do you think you guys gonna do in prediction the rest of the countries playing in it?
US will do okay because we are okay. I feel like Spain and France are really good. To be honest, I haven't watched a ton, but style of play and like personnel they have, like you kind of are getting to like these teams have a lot of good players. They have really strong styles of play, like their culture and their country, and those players know their style of play. And when you're on a team and you all see an action happening with the opponent and you all see it and then think the same sequence and then you can act like one, that's when soccer is the best sport in the world. And those two cultures and their countries and their style of play is like very cohesive.
Yeah, I agree. For me, I think that maybe the top four teams would be England, Spain, Argentina's up there for me. I think having Messi and obviously the team rallying around him is big. France is up there, but yeah, it could be anybody. I think any of those four, maybe five top teams could win it. And unfortunately, I'll be going to some of the games. I'm excited for that. I'm going to be seeing France, Norway, which I'm excited about, and then as well as Ghana and England.
Oh, sick. That's gonna be cool.
Yeah, they're playing here in Boston, so I'm excited about that.
That's really cool. How's your NBA stuff going?
I haven't started yet, so I'm currently in my job right now. It's gonna be, I think September is the first day of class, so I have a bit more time. So I'll be relaxing a bit this summer, hopefully.
That's awesome.
Well, appreciate you taking the time here. I know we ran over. I asked for 45 minutes, but it's been an hour now. So appreciate the time here. And then thanks again. I guess lastly, for those that want to follow your journey and watch you in your next, I think you're trying to do surfing next. So maybe those that want to follow your journey and what you do next, where can they find you?
Yeah, I would just say, like, I probably Instagram's the most public thing that I have at the moment. I'll probably start doing some other content stuff in the future, but that's still too early to direct, but Instagram's a great spot.
All right, amazing. Thanks again for your time and hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Awesome, have a great day.
Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen and support this podcast. It is very much appreciated. Please follow the show if you don't already do so. The show can be found on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and the rest of the other major platforms. As always, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Much love. This show is produced by Yak Awok and original music by Scott Holmes.